Little from the Alliance Party. Let's welcome our panel.
In terms of the question, certainly there should be an education skills authority, and the sooner the better as far as we're concerned. And there should be more working together at that higher level with the different sectors, where that be maintained, integrated movement, control, geoskilling, etc. They should all be around the same table. And I think, moving forward, and I always go back to my own constituency, that there's a number of examples there where schools are already doing a lot of good work between different sectors, and I think that needs to be encouraged more. I would, however, say that parents still should have a choice in terms of how their children are educated, and if that choice is to be educated, that should be encouraged and that should be accommodated.
But that should be within one integrated system with the schools authority, even the educated option. Everything under one umbrella. Basil McGrath, is that the way forward?
Well, I suppose the first thing that I noticed is that when you brought the political elite up onto this table,
do you like that term?
That the press immediately left.
Oh, don't you believe it?
With one notable exception.
No, we've got at least two over there. They're hanging on your every word, and you always give good copy.
I was about to give good copy, and then they all left on me. And anyway, I do promise to pass on your message to the political elite whenever I meet them. So there's an issue here about, you asked a question, there's a couple of things I want to get off my chest as well. You see, we're sitting up here waiting to get a pan knocked in from you lot. And here's the question, is you see these politicians, you vote for them. Right? You vote for them, you're the electorate. And if you're not winning your argument, don't come to me and say, oh, we're not listening to your argument.
But even the constituencies are segregated, aren't they?
The whole thing comes back into this about if you're trying to impose a solution upon people that do not want the solution you're offering. And when people talk to me about an ESA, I have to tell you, I am not voting, I am not putting my hand up for a system that gets huge powers where somebody, whatever that individual is, can impose a solution on the people that vote for me that they do not want to accept. That's not democratic. That's not what I'm here about. If you can win the argument, if you can come along and say, this is the way forward, everybody's rights are respected, everybody can move along together, there's a genuineness in the engagement, then I'm all for it. But what you actually get is mealy-mouthed words where people issue platitudes, say they'll do everything for everybody, and that's why we get no forward motion.
Well, we favour the establishment of an ESA, and we favour that tomorrow. I look forward to it being done. So, I suppose a couple of general observations. I agree with, I think it was Bernadette and possibly Michelle, and possibly someone else who said that we need a 20-year thinking. And I do agree that what we need to begin now is a conversation about what education will look like in 20 years' time in this region. And I think we can just about begin to have that conversation now, because we're just about coming to terms for the first time in our history with the basic fact that we are a region. Not that we are in some amazing sort of supranational contest about trying to achieve something we're not. And I think that's quite important to understand, because the way we choose to educate our children, and parental choice, is important, and it always will be. I think any system that would deny parents or children the right to make a choice about the type of education system they would have would be probably one which would likely fail, and would, I think, likely also fail to realise the potential of the children's education.
Can you give us your 20-year picture?
Well, I can give you the principles around which I think it needs to be built. I think the principle of equality, and equality is not equality between Catholics and Protestants, or nationalists and unionists. It's the real inequality in our education system, which is social inequality. So I think social equity must be at the heart of our education system. I think community must also be at the heart of our education system, because there's nothing sadder than the story Patrick tells about having to make a choice and make a round trip of 44 miles and not be able to have his children go to school in their own community. And that's a particularly important challenge for us in the decades ahead as we come to terms with rural depopulation and the changes in our cities and all that sort of stuff. I think sharing for our regional context is a principle we must embrace. And then finally, I think we need to embrace the principle of education, excellence rather than academic excellence. Understanding that a good education is a right for every child, not just those who show some good potential. Now, where will that take us? Well, I think it will take us looking at our history, looking at our cultural traditions. I think it will take us into a place where we will have a very large number of shared faith schools. And those will be schools that will need a fundamental change in how the Catholic Church sees and relates to and controls education, or its slice of the education pie. But it will also mean that the state, the northern state, the regional government bit of us, will have to change the way it officially sees education. Because the sad reality of it is, and I think Bernadette put her finger on it, that we do make our choices about education because we do have two very different views about the state.
President.
Well, thanks for the invitation to be here today to start with.
Sorry, apologies. To answer the question, if we're focusing on choice and we're listening to the public, Basil has reframed the politicians versus the community here, but hopefully we can work together. We're hearing that 2/3 of the public want young people to be educated together. We're hearing from the community and voluntary sector that they want people to be educated together. And an Alliance Party panel recently, key figures from the economy background in Northern Ireland said that their one thing that they would change to improve the economy in Northern Ireland would be shared education. So that's the message coming forward loud and clear. So can we deliver a system that educates our young people together? Absolutely. And should you have one single educational skills authority? Yes.
Other questions, comments? Shall we come to this table? I haven't been here in a while. Anyone? To the politicians.
Is that everybody talks nice words, everybody says we all want to be friends, we all have a vision of the future, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty, vested interests are very clever at defending the status quo. And I'll say to you, where I am now, I'm actually not on education anymore, I'm chairing Committee on Employment and Learning. So in, I think it's 2 weeks' time, we'll have a consultation back about the proposed merger of Stranmillis and Queen's. I suspect followed fairly shortly after that by the proposed merger of St Mary's and Queen's. And it'll be interesting to see how that debate goes, because you will come back out. I was aware 2 years ago when the Minister for Education at the time reduced our requirement for teachers on the basis of look at the 60,000 empty desks, this great mantra, and suddenly inadvertently discovered that she just closed St Mary's. So then suddenly they had to go, oh no, we need more teachers in St Mary's to keep it viable, and then we needed more teachers in Stranmillis to keep it equality. And now we have a situation where we're producing, I think, 625 new teachers this year, of which 4 will get a job. And you go, so there's some real hard issues that people are going to sit and talk about when you get down to the fundamentals in this. And the real issue, and I won't go on, but I mean, part of the reason why I come up here is about, Bernadette telling us you're going to wait a long time for vision to come from politicians. Well, it's a long ballot paper. Anybody can put their name on it, Bernadette. You can stand up and see how it
I
goes.
voted people before profit.
And you got more or less the same response I got in Lagan Valley. So, the issue. That, by the way, for anybody who's listening, is a joke with the press. So the issue comes back now is that you do have to look about, this is not about education. This is about politics or community identity or other issues. If it was just about education, then it would be right to look at us in the way that we look at Birmingham or something like that. But there are all sorts of really complex issues bound up in that, and you have to win the argument that this is the right way forward. Otherwise, what you try and do is impose a solution on a community that is not ready for that solution.
Yeah, Dahi, we haven't heard from you in a while. What's your response to what you're hearing?
Well, I mean, in terms of the question, in terms
Just hit that button.
of concerns that people have in terms of dealing with officials, I mean, I don't think anyone shares that frustration more than the politicians, because we face the same issues through committees, especially. I'm sure the ministers do as well. So it's a matter of making your way through that now, and the best way is to do it through like the representatives and politicians directly, through officials at times if there is no progress being made, because those officials are there to serve the public. Civil servants are there to serve the public, and if they're not doing the job, then they should be told the task.
But are
We
the
need to do that.
politicians in Northern Ireland serious about demolishing segregation? Not just in education, but in housing and in every other area of our life. Are politicians serious about that? Or is there a vested interest there in the status quo?
I don't think there's a vested interest in status quo. I think we need to move forward, we need to bring down the walls, and we need to do so in such a way that it's going to be sustainable and in the long term. And we have made immense progress in the past 4 to 5 years. And in terms of the survey, in terms of people wanting their children to be educated through integrated education, I think that's absolutely true.
We've put up more walls in the last 4 or 5 years. We've put up more walls since the Good Friday Agreement than we had before it. Where's the progress?
In terms of physical walls?
Well, I mean, where's the progress? We're not shouting as much, but the segregation is everywhere to be seen.
Well, segregation is still a problem, but I mean, in terms of education, what we need to do is integrate more. We need to ensure there is more shared opportunities for people to interact. Because when I was a child, when I went to school, the only time I interacted with the children from the other main community in the area was through, there was a play group that was set up, that was cross-community in the area. That was, and the only time between then and when I went to technical college was on the school bus. So we need to address that issue in particular, because even if parents are going to send their children to a controlled or maintained sector, there's still, those sectors have a responsibility to ensure there's a lot more communication and a lot more relationship building.
I can beat the bus. I had to go to the east coast of America on a Project Children expedition to meet my first Catholic from Northern Ireland. I mean, I'm not that. There's a lot of people like me in North Belfast. Come on.
I could tolerate sick children, but I haven't come to Northern Ireland to make a Protestant. And I grew up in Spain, right? It's not just a problem in the Republic. There's a couple of things. I mean, can I pay tribute to the shared education program? I think it's an outstanding success. I'd love to see it mainstream, but I'm not surprised that officials find it difficult to find a home for it, because of course it doesn't fit with the program. That's the problem. And the reason it doesn't fit with the program is because there is no agreed vision to where education should be in 20 years. And you're absolutely right. It is a symptom of a wider lack of agreement about the capacity of this region to coalesce around itself for the next decade or 100 years, without prejudice to one's constitutional aspirations or national identity. And that is the fundamental challenge facing this generation of MLAs. Do we continue to project a future which is based on a narrative of a bipolar nationalisms, or are we capable of understanding that there are layers of identity, some of which are shared, some of which are not, and there are therefore layers of government which can be capable of being shared without compromising your position on those bits of your identity? Yeah. Bottom line is that when I have private conversations with the bishops, and when I say to May, I think it's terrible that she's not able to have so, and when I have private conversations with senior transferers, as they are known, I hear the same message, and the message is, this ain't going to continue to work the way it's going. This has to change. I hear a very clear message also from senior people in the integrated education movement that says our solution is not going to be the ultimate solution. I think we need to get honest with each other about that. I think we all need to begin in public to be frank about the fact that we all know whatever vested interest we come from, and we are all in a vested interest, and let's be honest about that too. There is no moral high ground in this argument. That we are absolutely unable to succeed apart. But the political challenge is beyond education. The political challenge is actually to create the concept of a viable region. And we must absolutely challenge each other at the ballot box, and every time we come into places like this, to understand that that is the basic problem. And once we get over that, we create the space for the other problems.
Chris.
That's going to pick up on a couple of points. Frustration with departmental officials, frustration with politicians, and whether we like it or not, they are the people with decision-making power. But the question is, are they representing the desires for change of the wider community and of people who are dedicated to working on this issue that are gathered here today? I suspect that they're not. And how do we change that? Well, I agree with Bernadette, it's extremely hard work. We didn't deliver a cross-community MP in East Belfast overnight, but that was dramatic change for that particular area. So I hope that the politicians can like as Donald has referred to, 20-year thinking can start a new wave of thought and start working together on this issue. If we're serious about shared future being more than rhetoric, if we're serious about delivering first-class education that is equal, then we have to provide a shared system. Basil referred to 60,000, 30,000 empty seats rather flippantly, but that's scandalous. We need to tackle that issue.
I'm very comfortable with that policy in that I don't believe in an educational system that segregates on ability at 10. I'm the product of a baccalaureate, okay, so we're all prejudiced in this conversation on declaration of interest.
So parents get no choice in that area?
Pardon me?
Parents get no choice in that area?
Well, you wouldn't. In a comprehensive education system, you get no choice on the question.
I guess the consistency question is, if you have a policy that says parents get no choice in that grammar school area, why not have a policy that says you get no choice either in the religion-based segregation area either?
And it's a perfectly legitimate question, and the answer that one gives in this region is not a function of rationality, it's a function of history. And
you mean you lose votes?
No, it's not a question. It's not even a question of politics. It's a question. It goes beyond that, William. It's a question of identity. The reason parents make choice, in my experience, and I don't claim to be the authority of it, but the parents I know, and I am one of them, I made a choice. Well, we made a choice for our eldest son, to transfer from a state primary school to a Catholic grammar school last Saturday morning. Now, why did I make that choice? Well, I could talk to you all privately about it for hours and hours and hours. There is aspects of ethos in it. There are very selfish reasons about wanting the best for your child, which I think is every parent's right. And I don't buy into using your kids as pawns of your own political ideology. There are issues of identity, which are quite important to me, because I am someone of obviously pretty obvious political identity, pretty obvious cultural identity, and that's important to me. Now, the question comes back to my earlier point. If we are to be able to create a system that makes the parental choice based on identity less of a big choice, then we are going to have to start getting very transformative about our thinking. We are going to have to start looking, it was made in the earlier panel about all sorts of things about the curriculum. We're going to have to start looking at the culture in schools. We're going to have to look at the place, how the schools relate to what we would call the equality agenda here at a regional level when we're talking about it between two communities. We're going to have to stop thinking that if you send your child to this school, they will be turning out more in that mould of their perception of history and with that inclination in terms of their cultural or political identity. If they go here, they will churn out the other way. That's the real challenge. And
You've described it very eloquently, but a critic would say you've just described division factories. But
that's what we have.
But that's what you're supporting.
No, I am saying...
You're supporting the right of parents to continue to make choices for them.
I am saying that is the status quo.
But you're not defending the status quo.
No, I'm not.
So let's abandon that system. Let's remove that choice from parents.
What I'm saying is, if you want to move beyond the status quo, you cannot do it by an exercise in managerialism. You have to do it by actually stepping outside and creating the space for all the vested interests to step outside of that status quo. And stop thinking that it's just about a little bit of tinkering here, a little bit of tinkering there, a bit of transformation here, a bit of transformation there, and giving everyone the space to buy into an agreed vision for education, an agreed concept of education, and then figure out it's the old argument about function and form, right? Function, should follow what? And we often have the debate the wrong way around here. We often choose deliberately to engage in a bit of tinkering around the edges so as not to have to deal with the elephant in the room. I'm saying that the politics of this debate should be the politics about the education in the room, about where we want to be in 20 years.
On a more practical level.
Danny, can you answer that question? Are we going to have an executive-led review? Hit the button again.
Well, as Donald said, there's a DUP proposal. We haven't seen any detail of that, but we do see it and consider it like any other policy.
If we're honest about it, one of the reasons that Catholicism has this problem with transferring to the state is because Catholicism has had a very uneasy relationship with what was historically the northern state. Now, that is, we're either in a transformed era, and the old northern state is no longer, and we have a new incarnation, which I prefer to call a region, because that's the way I see it, or we don't. And if we do, then it is time for all the vested interests to step up to the mark and begin to be open about how far they are willing to go. And the state has a huge role, the region, the executive has a huge role in creating the legislative opportunities for that to happen. And I agree, I don't know any of us would have a problem with that conversation starting. I certainly wouldn't at all.
Wouldn't it make more sense, Basil, just to develop over the next 20 years a vision so that in 20 years' time everybody is educated in one educational system and religion is not part of it? There's a separation of schools and religion. If you want religion, you go to church for religion. You want an education, you go to schools.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I am. You know, I believe it's a 20-25-year programme. One of the issues that we have is we try and do so much in 1 year, the people are not quite prepared for it. And I think it's a journey of exploration and understanding. I'd say a couple of things here, if you don't mind, just to pick up on those points. If it's about education, the figures are about 30% of educational attainment is down to schools. 70% is down to the environment upon which you operate in. By far the most important determinant on how well a child does in educational terms is how engaged the parents are. It's parental involvement.
Social class we heard earlier.
It's actually but it's parental involvement. When you look at those children that do well, perhaps coming from lower social classes, the differential is that the parents care and they're involved and they read and they do whatever. Parental involvement cannot be got away with. It is the determining factor. And I have to tell you, I reject, and I'm probably of the minority of one on this panel, I reject centralism. I reject the fact that we're going to have some monolithic Department of Education that's going to tell us one size fits all, here's the way you're going to go and do it, everybody's going to be equal in all this. It does not work. It is the dead hand of the civil service on you, the point that you were making earlier. What you want to see, in my opinion, is schools that are free to develop the education for their area in the way that they see fit, led by principals that have got great leadership skills, supported by teachers that have been trained to the highest level. And there is a report that says that you cannot get a better education than you have in terms of the standard of the teachers that are teaching the children. That's the issue when you come forward. We talked about ethos. It's competing ethoses. There are people for whom it is really important that they have a Roman Catholic education system. There are other people for whom it is really important that they have an integrated education system. That's why you're also passionate about it. There are other people that have really important feelings about they want a grammar school type of education, and there are yet other people who want an Irish medium education. And for all of those that are left out, the bucket that takes everything is the control sector, which is nothing to fight for, nobody to fight for it. Now, I come round and say to you, if you do not realise that there are political implications, it is not just about your sector or your particular issues, but how it impacts on the rest of the people in your region or whatever it is that you want to call it, then we don't get anywhere. The practicalities are that if you have a school in Macará which has 150 Protestants, besides St Pat's which has 1,000, and you close the school, the kids all go to Macrafelt, and South Londonderry becomes a sort of desert. This is not integration. This is not the way to go forward. We need to find some sort of system where people can work together, live together, without feeling threatened. And that's where it is about. It's about cultural identity and all of this. And I'll finish on this particular point. I know Tony Gallagher's over here and he has to pay me sort of money for this now. Tony and his team come up with different forms about how we might work together. I think William, it was you that said it is about the engagement strategy. The more people work together, the more people see each other in different things. And I was at OMA Integrated, I'm sorry I forgot the name of the Drumrock, that's it, Drumrock. But I was with folk from Castlederg and from Carrickmore. And a more mature discussion that you had between people you could want to think about, but nobody was forcing people into it. It was happening. And so my solution to you in all of this is that when people talk about the vested interest, do you understand this is slightly contentious, but in my opinion, the Roman Catholic Church does not want integrated education. It is not necessarily wrong in that. It is entitled to its opinion because it is bound up with the way that it sees the world. So we have to convince them, and I'm not singling out there's other people, we have to convince them that you can find a way forward that does not threaten the very things that they feel important. And my final word on this, I'm going to sound like a Presbyterian minister. We did try. People talked about the state. In 1921, when it was set up, Lord Londonderry wanted a secular education system. It was the combined churches that decided, you know what, that doesn't really reflect the way that we see the world. So if you're going to change this bit, it's about positive engagement with people, about telling them this is where you get to in a better 20 to 25 year future. It's good for the children, it's good for the country, it's good for all of us. And you're the champions for that, but you've got to win the argument. You cannot impose a solution.
We're nearly out of time, nearly time for lunch in fact. Chris, final word.
Just briefly, well, I think the assumption or myth that an integrated and shared system in some way hinders diversity or choice, be it grammar-based or sporting-based, is rubbish. We have examples across Northern Ireland of shared and integrated collaborative working where choice flourishes, diversity flourishes. So I'm not sure where the assumption and the myth is coming from on that front, and I think the point was well made by the previous speaker.
Can I ask you to take like 45 seconds each and just describe where you would like us to be in 20 years' time? Where would you like to push this system to in 20 years' time, Daffy? In as much detail as you can. Paint us a picture. Use diagrams if you like. There's a PowerPoint.
In terms of the integrated sector, I found Tony's presentation very interesting there. How you outline when you go to part of the process sharing and all the integrating. I think you're pushing an open door with parents, with society in general in terms of sharing. So I think we're going to push on with that now. And I think once parents and society is at that later stage, it's only a matter of, it's not going to be a big issue about moving further into the integrated education. And I think that's what this sector needs to concentrate on.
So that gives you your 20-year vision. In 20 years' time, what will the landscape look like? What would you like it to look like?
What I would like it to look like would be parents have choices, and they will continue to make choices, and we can't dictate to them what the choices want to be.
That's the status
quo.
That's
to
where
see
we are
more
right now.
integrated society. I would like to see more integrated education, and I would like to see it on a much better footing than it is now, because it's such a young sector as well. Obviously, the other two major sectors have a much bigger head start than they do in terms of capital build, in terms of resources, etc. I think we can integrate it on a similar footing, and then they will flourish.
So a bit more integrated education, 20 years time. That's your vision. Come on.
Here you go. 20 years time, I would like every child to have a statutory right to preschool and nursery education. I'd like that to be properly funded. I'd like us not to start school until we were 6, and I'd like us to properly fund primary schools, which we don't. In fact, disproportionately fund primary schools, which we don't. I'd like us to have adopted a baccalaureate-style system with a transfer at 14, where we are able to make a proper choice and children can be involved in it. And I'd like it all to be based on those principles of sharing, of social equity, and of educational excellence. And if we can create a system and still have all the actors and all the best bits of what we have today in that system, I retire happy.
He nearly has it all policies all the way out for 20 years. Basil.
Well, I agree strongly with Connell in the emphasis on early years. I believe that there should be universal provision of nursery education, that's to say teacher-led or qualification-led. I'm not trying to put anybody down that's in playgroups, but we do need to make sure that we understand that's where the formative years take place. Not only is there an opportunity to engage with children at that level, but also with the parents that come back in. When people argue sometimes about the success of Finland and they say it's great because of the comprehensive education, they neglect to tell you that they also have statutory childcare at £60 a week. Now, if you have options to opt in and opt out, that's what you need. Universal preschool supported by mandatory childcare allowances. If you want to see a school system, it needs to be integrated in the sense that the transition from pre-primary to foundation to primary is wrong. There needs to be an integrated policy that runs through to that. When you look to the type of school estate that you want to have, I want to see maximised local autonomy. That's to say, schools run schools. with the support embedded in their community, with appropriate oversight to make sure that the standards are reached or right, but the schools run schools, and that we should reflect the diversity, we should welcome the diversity in our region, and that we should have educational establishments that cater for all people, but that they should be encouraged financially and otherwise to collaborate with others for the benefit of everybody.
Chris?
I agree wholeheartedly with the emphasis on childcare. The research shows between the ages 1 to 3 is a key development stage for any young person. We need to improve childcare at early years, area planning as well. We need to move on with that. But by 2020, we want to see a more shared integrated system that can deliver choice and diversity within that system, a more fair system as well. And let's have the department set a target of at least 20% of our children in integrated education by 2010.
2030. So we can't even maths. Let's add maths to the curriculum. Let's put that as part of our mission. Let's make our panel.